down the timeline. Meanwhile, at the MeetX viewfinder, disappointment, as continual cloud cover hinders yet another day of dust observations. The crew and the team of scientists on the ground are hopeful the next day's observations will be more fruitful. John Charles and his team strategically work the timeline, but the MGM experiment is still off schedule.
Casey and the whole crew was working overnight trying to fix that experiment. Couldn't do it. She asked us if we wanted to take another test cell out, which wasn't supposed to happen at that time. But listening to her, there was just this point, it just clicked with us saying, you know, Casey absolutely knows what she's talking about. She knows so much about her experiment. She just knows what she's saying, and we really need to listen to Casey. And we did that. We took her advice. She started a new test cell, and it got us 6 very good experiments out of it.
Data from the MGM experiments will be used to design safer structures in earthquake-prone areas. These results can only be achieved in microgravity, but it is the fire experiments that clearly illustrate why space is such a unique and ideal place for scientific research.
A simple example of an experiment that is drastically different in weightlessness versus on the ground is anytime you have a flame. If you take a flame, a similar kind of experiment in weightlessness, a birthday cake candle or another flame source, and you ignite that flame, there's no rising. There's not this teardrop shape, there's not this extended shape of the flame, and the flame actually is more of a ball, and instead of being yellow like you're used to seeing in your birthday cake, it's more of a small blue ball of flame.
To further study these flame balls, Columbia carries an experiment called softball, or structure of flame balls at low Lewis number.
And South Columbia will go ahead and begin the softball test sequence, if that's okay, and hold when we are supposed to.
The purpose of the experiment is to keep a flame ball burning with the leanest fuel mixture, and the goal is to keep these flames burning as long as possible. This fundamental research touches on many aspects of combustion, from designing clean, efficient engines for cars and airplanes to arson investigations. While working on the softball experiment late one night, Mike Anderson decides to call down to his friend Laura.
Mike was doing a CM2 softball run, and we were waiting for a particular part of the experiment.
Space Lab Columbia for Laura.
Go ahead, Mike.
And I thought that, that's odd. He's calling down for me and not an experiment. So I answered, go ahead, Mike.
How's the family doing?
And I was just really kind of taken aback because it's a little personal conversation that we were about to have on an air-to-ground loop with lots of people listening. And I said, well, it's the middle of the night and I'm kind of tired. And my son, John Hayden's birthday is in a few days. He's going to turn 1 and I'm going to miss it.
What's on this coming Monday?
It sure is. He'll be a big 1.
Wow, well, happy birthday to John Hayden. 1 year old, that's great.
We proceeded to have just a short conversation in the middle of the night where I guess a lot of people listened, but it was special to me.
Mike Anderson once said he couldn't remember when he didn't want to be an astronaut. From his schoolboy days in Eastern Washington, through his years with the Air Force, Mike was working toward his life's dream. It would become a reality in 1998 when the shuttle Endeavour docked with the space station Mir. A religious man dedicated to his family, Mike has many responsibilities as payload commander on this flight.
Mike Anderson, payload commander, he was perfect for that job. He is so detail-oriented, so professional. Of the entire crew, everybody was pretty much outspoken and lively. Mike was the quiet, professional one.
Though his job requires a serious disposition, Mike is not without his lighter personal side.
Mike was very special. Being the payload commander, he was always very focused, very serious, but I treasured those moments when we'd start chatting because he loved to talk about cars. So, you know, he'd come walking into the training session and say, "Hey, Beth, you bought that new convertible yet?" Which was a joke, because, you know, no, I haven't.
The scientific successes of the mission are due as much to Mike's dedication as to his optimism and professional attitude.
And for MEDEX coming up an area over water of 100% overcast.
Once again, cloud cover obstructs the MEDEX camera from any glimpse of dust storms. But the MEDEX experiment also intends to study lightning. Dave points the camera's high-powered lens right into the middle of a developing thunderstorm.
Tim, the MEDEX folks ought to be real happy with this. This is definitely the most intense that we've seen since we've been on orbit.
The MEDEX team has reason to be happy. Dave's camera work captures the first images ever recorded from space of the electrical phenomena known as sprites. Understanding these upside-down lightning bolts improves the efficiency of satellites and could even hold secrets to the evolution of the solar system. Before launch, astronauts packed a few valuable items to bring to space. In some cases, they offered to carry items for their new friends on the ground.
One day, I pull up my email at work and I see an email from Dave from space. And I open the email and I open it up and there's a picture of my family floating on the flight deck of Columbia. And you can look out the windows that look back into the payload bay, see the tail of Columbia in the background, and there we are just floating in space on Columbia. And it's just a cherished photograph for me now to have this from space. And if Dave hadn't emailed it, I would have never known that he took it.
A week into the mission, and the scientists on the ground are thrilled with the results of the experiments so far. As a special treat, the crew downlinked some favorite video highlights.
Next up for the blue shift was a blood draw back in the space hab. Here Laurel is, I think she's telling Mike at the moment that this isn't going to hurt her a bit. We've got quite a bit of stuff that we use for this, so we're provided with little clips of Velcro and the like to hold everything down. Of course, one thing about microgravity is instead of handing things, you can just pass them from one end of the nodule to the other. So that's really handy sometimes in the lack of gravity. This is Casey, and she's working on an experiment known as BioPact, which is from the European Space Agency. There's 8 experiments in BioPact. The one she's working on is called Bones and studies human bone cells, trying to understand better how to prevent osteoporosis, not only the kind of bone loss that astronauts get in space, but something that might affect people that are at bed rest, or actually that everyone is at risk for on Earth, particularly women.
As it turns out, the softball experiment takes on a life of its own.
I just wanted to let you know we have visual confirmation on the ground that we have 3 flame balls, and the radiometer readings are good.
And they look great from here.
When I came into work that night, the other CIC informed me that Dave had started naming the softballs.
This looks like a pretty happy flame ball, and I'm not exactly sure why, but I think I'm going to name him Howard.
We copy, Dave, whatever works.
David Brown's fun-loving spirit and boundless energy complement his unquenchable thirst for knowledge. A gymnast who became a physician, built his own plane in college, and became a Navy fighter pilot. He'd done it all. But nothing was more important to Dave than documenting his extraordinary experiences.
Dave was what I call a documentarian of the crew. He wanted to film every aspect of the training and the mission. And he told me many years ago, because he had a camera with him all the time, he said, "Robert, I may never get to do this again, so I'm going to capture every moment of it." And he meant that. He filmed everything, he photographed everything, he recorded everything, and he was going to make this incredible documentary of the entire time that they were together as a crew. And it got to be a running joke because he had a camera with him all the time. And I tell my family, if you see walkout on launch day when we're all walking out together, if you see in my hand I'm carrying a camera, that's Dave's camera, because he wanted to film every aspect of everything.
We start off showing you an orbital sunrise from the shuttle. What happens in about an hour on the Earth happens as quickly as you're going to see it. Orbiter at night is a very pale blue, but rapidly it'll become kind of reddish, turning to gold, and even brighter gold. And then the orbiter becomes quite white.